please.
Pastor, if I'm not mistaken, a few times Pastor mentioned about the 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 dependent origination, or the when you mention, when we see samsara and nibbana as a dual, the that means uh, the existence of samsara depend on nibbana, or nibbana vice versa. But
Yes.
As far as I know, it is precisely we want to escape from dependent origination. So the dependent origination is samsara, but nibbana is not dependent origination, because we want to escape. We want to be freed from the dependent
Yes.
origination itself. That means we
Yes.
the samsara is really a different realm.
Yes. Sure.
So this two, is it two conflicting idea, or what, Pastor?
Not at all. Now we will learn in this lesson, which is most important as far as practice is concerned. Uh, as soon as we start thinking, and thinking is differentiation, and differentiation is based on six consciousness. So we are going astray. We cannot help it. This book is propagating this Wu Nian San Mei, the samadhi of non-thinking. This is the philosophy of this book. In order to accord with a true reality, which is non-dualistic, which cannot be attained by thinking, true reality cannot be attained by thinking. We cannot attain nirvana by thinking. Impossible. Yet, thinking is very important, but thinking is, in this tradition, only to make us realize that what is true is beyond thinking. And what is true is empty, so to say, of thinking. When the mind is empty of thinking, it stays. When the mind takes thinking as its true nature, then it does not stay. It's always moving. And it is moving, we have learned, because of the karmic consciousness. Now, when we become the Buddhas, we can abandon the karmic consciousness, and the alaya becomes the wisdom of the great mirror. And the continuity of the mind becomes a wisdom of the sameness. In this tradition, continuity of the mind is individual mind, manas. But the individual mind comes from the mind which is suchness. We have learned all the phenomena actually in presuppose the empty mind to uh, come to existence. If there was not empty mind, which has no form, which has no shape, has no akara, so the akara, the shape, the form in it could not arise. And when the mind identifies with the form, it identifies with the karmic consciousness. But the mind of the Buddha is beyond karmic consciousness, therefore it is a true mind, which is suchness. And in suchness, no attention to the form, no attention to the akara, but the Buddha gives rise to all akaras according to our deluded minds. So he knows the Agus deluded mind, Thomas deluded mind. He sees us not as real persons, but he sees us as the forms of deluded mind through his wisdom. Hmm? And we have learned this Buddha wisdom illumines everything and is present everywhere. Hmm? Because in the uh, wisdom mind, there is no difference between the form and the non-form. They come always together. This is what we going to learn today. The form and mind, the nama rupa, are not separate. For us, they are separate because we identify with the karmic mind. When we become enlightened bodhisattvas, we still hmm, give rise to shapes and forms in our mind, but we don't identify with them anymore. Then we become true bodhisattvas. Now we are only bodhisattvas by pranidhi, by determination. Hmm? And even so, we are uh, bodhisattvas by determination. We can still understand the body. This is where we come to today. The body, Sambhogakaya, the body of joy. The body of joy is the body of the mind which does not think. Then uh, then its light can illumine forms, knowing that the forms come from the mind itself. When we progress in our bodhisattva practice, we will start seeing very clearly, still on the base of the mental consciousness, which still uh, I can identify with forms as something being there outside. But when our faith and conviction in the non-dual reality has ripened, then we will start seeing these forms like in a dream, exactly as the uh, the sutra, the Diamond Sutra is teaching. So this is how we, even though we are not yet, we have not yet realized pure mind, which is suchness, we, by our realization of the face, we can start seeing the Sambhoga Kaya because we believe that these forms are coming from the mind. And through our belief, it becomes a certainty. Hmm? So when we realize our belief, so we are in a way sure to realize the pure vision. And when we realize a pure vision, then we realize nirvikalpa jnana, woof and pieja. The knowledge, the true knowledge, is the knowledge of non-differentiation. And we see then differentiation as being a complete delusion. Now we have insight that differentiation is a delusion, but we still identify with differentiation. So it means we are still practicing uh, on the level of the six consciousnesses. So we can still have clinging, and we believe in concepts being something which has a reality, which has true characteristics. But uh, we even so we don't have yet this pure mind which never leaves us. That is a situation of realized bodhisattvas like Xu and Lao He. That means whatever happens, he still stays in the non-dualistic mind. So we sometimes get into non-dualistic understanding, sometimes we lose it. When we meditate, then what will happen? When we get used to non-thinking in meditation, when we become familiar with Zen meditation, then when we this non-thinking will have continuity, and when non-thinking has continuity, the whole body is illumined. You must have experienced that also. And this is how through the Sambhoga Kaya we are, so to say, led to the true reality, which is Dharmakaya. And this true reality is part of us in this tradition as the womb of Tathagata. The womb of Tathagata is hidden because we identify with thinking. When we don't identify with thinking, then we are connected with the womb of uh, Tathagata. In the Theravada tradition, when we don't think, our mind is in a bhavanga. And this bhavanga is said to be illumined. When the Buddha teaches that the nature of the mind is illumination and that the defilements are accidental, are guests to the mind, it is interpreted as the bhavanga. When we don't think, then there is still continuity of the mind, that is bhavanga. In this tradition, this continuity of the mind is the manas we have seen. And in the manas, we have this most subtle form, which is a karmic consciousness. Karmic consciousness is inseparable from the darshana bhaga and nimitta bhaga, from the subject and object. And when there is subject and object, then we can feel something. Feeling means touch. But when we have a subtle mind, we still know that we touch the objects coming from the mind itself. So we are touching the forms created by the mind itself. That is, we have access to subtle forms. And when we have access to subtle forms, then we can see that this our individual mind, which is continuity of the mind, come from the true mind. And the true mind does not move, but it can still produce all forms, because without the base, which is formless, no forms can appear in this tradition. So we have access to one mind. This treatise teaches the philosophy of the one mind, in which the samsaric mind, which is always moving, and the true mind, which does not move, uh, are joined together. That is one mind. And they are joined together where? In this Tathagata Garbha, which is our, uh, so to say, true nature, uh, hidden by defilements. As soon as we identify with the differentiating mind, so we are inclined to get involved in defilements. But when we don't think, we have no inclination, right? And when we have no inclination, we can understand the mind which stays. The mind which stays is paradoxically the mind which does not think. Hmm? And when we understand the mind which does not think, we can start working, as this treatise has described, with the subtle distinction. Otherwise, only gross distinction. So, according to the great Pragya Paramita Sutras, the great sutras of wisdom, there are two kinds of bodhisattvas. They are the bodhisattvas who have experienced their five aggregates in terms of this flesh body, Zhou Shen, and the true bodhisattvas who experience the five aggregates in terms of the Dharmakaya, the Dharma body, which has no shape, but from which all shape comes. This comes from Pragya Paramitas. All Mahayana is a commentary to the Pragya Paramitas, to the Pragya Paramita Sutras. So, the Pragya Paramita Sutras teach if the uh, mind had a real object, then it would have to create another mind. But there is only one mind. If the mind had a true object, this is a paradox, it would have to create another mind. But there is no such other mind in this uh, non dualistic tradition. The mind has always been, always is, and always will be just one mind. But because we identify uh, taking as this sutra teaches, we will, this shastra, this treatise teaches, we will come to it today. This is a summary of the explanatory part. Identifying with thinking is like taking the uh, east direction for the west and west direction for the east. So we are Mishin. Mishin means the mind which has lost the way. When the mind has lost the way, the Pragya Paramita Sutras teach, then it is not connected with the Tershin, the mind created by virtue, the Buddha mind, but it is connected with Yeshin, with a mind created by our karma. Hmm? So when we are aware of the mind created by virtue, which does not attach to any thinking, then we can penetrate the subtle forms. And subtle forms in this tradition, as we have learned, they come from the true mind. Hmm? Is it clear now?
Yes, helpful,
We
Mas.
have to we have to experience in meditation. Uh, so, in meditation, in a Theravada meditation in which I have been trained and with which I am very familiar, the we have impression is that the mind does not move when we attain the dhyana, right? And but in order to understand that the dhyana is not nirvana, you have to investigate the mind in dhyana as arising and passing moment by moment on the same object with the same perception and with the same feeling. Otherwise, you cannot master the dhyana and you cannot understand, misunderstand. This was common in Buddha's time, that the dhyana with an object is not nirvana, is not liberation, is not mukti. In the time of Buddha, many people practice deep concentration, experience all kinds of dhyana, but they mistake it for the mukti, for liberation. Now, the Buddha was the first who has very precisely and with very clear logic and explanation of skillful means and practice explain that as long as a mind takes an object as something real, it cannot be nirvana. And this is Pragya Paramita. According to Pragya Paramita Sutras, even the Arahat, the disciples who experience nirvana, they experience non-differentiating mind, but because they don't have a clear understanding of this experience, so they still believe, have realistic uh, view of the world. There is an object, there is a mind. When mind pays attention to the object, then the mental process arises, and the object exists, so to say, before the mind. But such a thing, actually, when investigated thoroughly, there is no such experience of an object existing before the mind. This is what already the disciples like Sautrantika, they understood that all mental objects are only nimittas of the mind.
Okay, thank you,
So
Pak.
the so this non-dualistic understanding is very useful, and it does not uh, is not in contradiction with the Abhidharma. It explains the kind of the difficulties when you get involved with describing objects of differentiated consciousness as the highest reality. That was a big problem because these objects of differentiating consciousness, they were quite different in each and every tradition. And each and every tradition, and there were many traditions, believed that their view is right. No? Sarvastivada believed so, Theravada believed so, and there were many other traditions, Dharmaguptakas, huh? Roko Theravadins, and so on. Everybody believed hmm, that their view is correct. So the objects of a differentiating mind cannot be objects of the highest reality. That should be very clear. But we need them in order to that they can lead us to go beyond differentiating mind. So shall we start with the text?
Yes, Pastor, please.
So, so now he has explained that what commoner sees are but gross forms which differ accordance with the different samsaric uh, realms, and because people identify with these forms, they do not see the uh, the forms of the body of enjoyment, the Sambhoga Kaya, the Spaoshen. Now, when we practice and when we have non dualistic understanding of our meditation, then we start relying, due to our faith in the Buddha, true Buddha being the Dharmakaya, and so on, we start to uh, have faith in the that all forms come from the mind. And so when we practice bodhicitta and give rise to the enlightened mind, which is the actually one mind, then uh, we can get understanding of the Sambhogakaya. But this understanding of the Sambhogakaya still will be on the base of differentiating consciousness. Hmm? So this is the limitation of us who have not yet uh, attained the completely pure mind, which in this tradition is non-dualistic. Hmm? Is not based on vikalpa, on differentiating mind, but is based on non-differentiating mind. Hmm? The vipassana of the disciples is based on differentiating mind, correctly differentiating. But all differentiations are actually only from the point of view of the transcendental wisdom to go beyond differentiation. Hmm? And the disciples also have to go beyond differentiation to understand paradoxically limitations of differentiation. We have learned that before. So when we practice bodhicitta, we have the deep faith in suchness, Genrufa, and we have the deep faith that actually what stands in our experience and does not move is the suchness. This is the Zen meditation, Dzogchen meditation, Mahamudra meditation. It is only suchness which stays. Nothing else can stay, because everything else is a process, and in a process, nothing can stay. And the process can only come from when there is the true mind which stands, as opposed to the deluded mind which identifies with a movement. And it identifies with a movement because of this six consciousness. Hmm? So even now we are have aspiration to become the Buddhas, but we still work on the base of a differentiating consciousness, because we are not yet uh, directly linked to suchness. We only realize it by uh, our practice and our reasoning. And our practice is, in this tradition, to be familiar with a non-thinking mind. So, because we are getting familiar with this non-moving mind, so we understand that this body of enjoyment, the body of bliss, has uh, no uh, has the subtle forms which do not come and do not go. This is the pure land, of course. The Amitabha land, the Sukhavati land, the Chila Shutye, in which even the birds are singing the song of Dharma, the song of the Buddha who comes in suchness and goes in suchness, and is free from limitations. And these limitations manifests only in the moving mind. When the mind does not move, it is linked to no limitations. Because when we don't move the mind, what limits the mind? This is what even the Western philosophy, the Socrates, based on this, he believed that the nature of the mind has no limitation. Only when we remember, hmm, which is to think, in Chinese, remember and think is the same word, nian, then we become aware of the mind limitations. When we do not think, when we do not pay attention to any particular objects, where is our mind? No one can find it. So this is uh, illustrated by the story of Hui Ke, the second Chinese patriarch, who had such a devotion to Bodhidharma because he believed he is the true suchness, that he cut off his hand and asked him for instructions. And he instructed him to uh, show show his mind because his mind was not in peace. And he could not find it. This not finding the mind is being linked to the true mind. This is Zen. This is the beginning of the Zen tradition. And this is a mind which the Buddha has directly manifested to Kashyapa uh, and so on. And this is the content of the true illumination. How we can, a teacher of Zen, transfer his knowledge to us because he tests us about our familiarity with the non-moving mind. Even though all kinds of things are moving, our mind does not move. When we know that this is the true mind, then we are bound to become Zen masters. And it is not easy to be a Zen master. Even Master Shen Yen, from my association with him, when somebody calls him Changsha, he would protest. I am not a Changsha, I am just teacher of Chan. Changsha already means that we can teach the pure mind. This is very difficult. Not by words, but by just being it all the time. That is a true Changsha. So even great Chan masters like Master Shen, no doubt, and many others, if they have the true understanding. I heard even His Holiness Dalai Lama saying the same thing. If they have the true understanding, they will never say that they are the uh, true mind. They uh, themselves learn the true mind and teach the true mind to others. But as opposed to us, they understand very well that this true mind is free from limitations, so they are not stuck in limitations. We are stuck in limitations because we don't have this deep faith like Huike. When we have this deep faith, our mind will not move even when we experience intense suffering. This is very difficult. So, unless we have this genuine experience of uh, pure mind, non dualistic mind, which always stays with us, so that we are not anymore subjected to clinging to any objects because we understand all objects come from mind. So the situation will change. Now we are still the bodhisattvas practicing the faith, deepening the faith, so that we can dwell in bodhicitta, we can practice according to bodhicitta and transfer merits to all beings for all what we do according to bodhicitta. Then we are prepared to receive the pure mind which stays and does not leave us. But being the bodhisattvas working with aspiration, we are still subjected to uh, differentiations which are subjected and to which we hold, because we have not yet attained the base in Dharmakaya. The base in Dharmakaya is the mind, true mind, which does not dwell, which becomes the beginning of uh, everything that happens. So, paradoxically, again, this non dualistic tradition always working with paradoxes, that mind which does not dwell is the mind which dwell. Where dwell? In that in which, from which the all objects come from. So, with this understanding, we come to the next stage, which, when we have, according to the Mahayana doctrine of gradual path, we have practiced with 10 kinds of faith. When we master the 10 kind of faith, we are, so to say, anivarta. We are can never be turned back from true realization, which is non-dualistic. Then we will stay in the bodhicitta mind. It will not leave us. Then we will practice paramis according to the bodhicitta mind, which does not leave us anymore. And when we engage in virtuous practice, especially in shamatha and vipassana, and transfer merit to all sentient beings, not holding anything, knowing as The Diamond Sutra explains that all virtues belong to Dharmakaya, not to an individual. Hmm? Then we are ready for the true attainment of the pure mind. This is another part. So this stage is called pramudita in Sanskrit. In Chinese, shi. Shi means joy, the joyful stage. When you know that you can never be separated from the true mind, whatever happens, that is the most subtle joy. For us, we get some joy, but it again go. But this joy of being part of the mind which is true, which never changes and can never change, that is a true joy. And so we are directly linked to that which is very wonderful and subtle, it says. What is wonderful and subtle? The knowledge based on non differentiation. Our knowledge is still based on differentiation. But when we attain the pure mind, all our differentiation will be based on the uh, authentic experience of the non differentiating mind. And this non differentiating mind is linked to Dharmakaya. It can never lose the Dharmakaya. So this mind is open for the subtle forms because we become the bodhisattvas who don't dwell in this fleshy body, but we dwell in the Dharma body, in the Buddha nature. When we dwell in the Buddha nature, then, as Milarepa explains in his poems, we are listening to the sound of emptiness. We are tasting the food of emptiness. We are seeing the forms of emptiness. This is the wonderful experience nobody can really explain because it is beyond words. So, as we have said, the Pragya Paramita Sutra speak of the bodhisattva living in flesh and the bodhisattva living in Dharmakaya. Hmm? When we become Milrepa, when we become Xu Lao Hershang, we already live in Dharmakaya. We don't live anymore in this fleshy body. So we can tolerate unspeakable suffering without even moving the mind. So, uh, so the bodhisattva in this stage, when he has lives, stays in the Dharmakaya and his mind, uh, so he the forms which appear due to his mind because he is still not free from the karmic mind. When he becomes Buddha, he will be free from the karmic mind. But the bodhisattva in the first stage, he is only free uh, from the attachment to forms, but his mind still creates forms, and that mind which creates form is the karmic mind. But this karmic mind becomes more and more illusionary as he proceeds in these 10 stages of the practice of the bodhisattva. So the Dashabhumika Sutra, Shi Jing explain that each stage is linked with the 100 or 1,000 times more samadhis, which enable him to then consider very, very clearly all forms as being the Sambhogakaya, as being the forms of enjoyment. And when we attain this first stage of true realization, of non-dualistic realization, then we are linked to the what is called in the Mahayana tradition to the Vairochana Buddha. Vairochana Buddha has innumerable forms. So Vairochana Samadhi can create these innumerable forms, which, due to which the vasanas of ignorance are weakened and disappear, and the vision of true mind, which does not move, becomes more and more clear and unshakable. More and more unshakable in each and every stage of the bodhisattva realization. In the eighth stage, which is called Achala Putong, then the bodhisattva does not anymore react to any forms, but he can create forms according to his will. This is the stage, according to Master Taishi, which the author of this treatise, the Ashwagosha, is said to have arrived. It does not mean that Ashwagosha did not live in the flesh, did not teach Dharma in flesh, but this flesh becomes like the second moon, which is a completely unreal. For us, it is still real. So when we study the Avatamsaka Sutra, which is so fascinating, you see that the training of Sudana after meeting the Manjushri is these different teachers manifest to him all kinds of subtle forms in which he learns what our treatise here is teaching, that form and mind cannot be separated. And when we understand that, then we learn to create forms of enjoyment according to our wish. This is what the teachers of Sudana, the hero of the Huayanting of Avatamsaka Sutra, teach this Sudhana Bodhisattva. So he can finally meet Maitreya, who manifests to him the highest attainment, the 10th stage of the Bodhisattva path, in which actually the forms and mind become completely united within the one mind, did, which is revealing the Dharmakaya. Now we come to the last stage, the stage of the Buddha, when the karmic consciousness is abundant. What means the karmic consciousness is abundant? Very important to understand. When the karmic consciousness is abundant, then the subject and object is abundant. Because the from the karmic consciousness, from this self-witnessing aspect of the consciousness arises this Tianfen and Xiangfen, arises the Darshana Bhaga and the Nimitta Bhaga, arises the seer and the seen. The seer is the Avarjana Chitta, Juanshin, and the seer is the Kyati Vijnana, the Xianshin. So when we abandon the karmic consciousness, there is no more any seer and the seen. So, uh, so Dharmakaya of the Buddha is realized, which is without differentiation in terms of opposing forms, opposing phenomena, in terms of this as opposed to that. That does not exist anymore. In Sambhoga Kaya, in the body of enjoyment, due to which the bodhisattva can contemplate the truth that all objects come from the mind and not identify with them because he knows they come from the continuity of mind, which is individual consciousness. So, in Sambhogakaya body, they are still forms, and Buddha can manifest these Sambhogakaya forms, these joyful forms of samadhi. Uh, in for bodhisattvas who are not yet Buddhas, they can manifest still these forms, but by karmic consciousness. But when the karmic consciousness is abandoned, the idea of any form is also abandoned. So, in such mind, the Buddha, what does he do? He does not, he dwells in the mind without form, and he, due to, as we have learned, due to his compassion, he then understands like a mirror the forms which the mind of us deluded beings take. They take these forms due to the karmic consciousness. But when we become enlightened bodhisattvas, we understand that this karmic consciousness is what makes the world seem to be something apart from consciousness. So, uh, this mind of the Buddha, the Dharmakaya, or this shunyata, true emptiness, there is not true emptiness like ours, which is a concept, but the true emptiness, the Buddha's emptiness, has no concept. It is the ultimate reality without any influence of ignorance or seeds of ignorance whatsoever. So it can just reflect all things as they are. So when we abandon, and this is state of Buddha, when we abandon the karmic consciousness, all we see is the Dharma consciousness. And this Dharma consciousness has the ability to give rise to all forms. Because we have learned that all forms come from suchness. If there was no suchness, no form could ever appear. So now the Ashwagosha takes the position of a deluded person who still does not understand and asks if the Dharmakaya of all the Buddha is free from forms, hmm, free from rupa nimitta. Rupa is a form, uh, nimitta is image, is sign, and is also arising. Everything that arises due to an image. If there is no image in the mind, nothing can arise. And this image in the mind is called rupa nimitta. It can be very gross image in gross states of existence. It can be very subtle image in the subtle states of existence. It can be also no image. But if we attach to no image as being something, then we are still deluded because we have learned this Dharmakaya of the Buddha is not marked by tsu pi, by this and that. In it, there is no opposition whatsoever. There is no, as Agus has pointed out, there is no dependent origination. Dependent origination comes from it in this tradition, comes from Dharmakaya, comes from emptiness. When we understand it, this dependent origination is precisely as the Pragya Paramita Sutra described very wonderfully by many, many similes. It's a dream, it's an echo, it is second moon, it is a delusion, and so on and so on. Many, many examples. It is the castle of the Nagaras in the Nagara, the castle of the Gandharvas who live, beings who live through the orders, and so on. It's simply something which the this tradition calls a second mind. There has never been a second mind. There has always been the one mind. But in our deluded condition, this one mind we see as something separate from our experience. The job of this treatise is to lead us to this realization that it has never been separate from this one mind, and this one mind is all in our experience. However deluded it may be, however enlightened it may be, it is still one mind. Now, the author answers the Dharmakaya can manifest forms because it is the essence, the T or Li, the principle underlying. It is the usually they translate T as substance, but I don't like this European idea of true substance. It is rather the underlying principle, the Li in Chinese philosophy. Very important. This Dharmakaya is the underlying principle. I would translate like this: underlying all forms. So without the Dharmakaya, there cannot be any form, because all forms are, so to say, based on the principle of Dharmakaya. And the author explains, that is to say, mind and form are not dual, were never dual, and will never be dual. They were always together. Whenever there is a form, there is a mind. Whenever there is a form appears, the mind appears. But that mind which appears when there is a form, it never leaves the one mind. And when we understand it, the very nature of, we also know that very nature of form is knowledge. Jnana, Zhi, or Zhihui, the wisdom. The knowledge, the true knowledge in this tradition is a knowledge which has no form. And because the true knowledge has no form, it has the ability to illumine all forms. So the true mind is the illumination of all forms. That is why we, in all civilization, West, East, North, South, we always represent the knowledge as a light. Like the sun illumines the earth, so the true knowledge illumines all forms. Therefore, the principle, the Li or the Ti of form is shapeless. Nir akara. Akara in Chinese Xing, in best translation we can make into English or European languages, is shape. The principle of form is shapeless. Very wonderful. So that knowledge which has no form is the principle of all forms, because all forms appear in it. So when there is jnana, when there is knowledge, there is jnana aloka. There is a light of the knowledge. We cannot conceive knowledge without the light. So this principle of form is, which is shapeless, which is without a shape. Rupa we translate as form, and akara we translate as shape. The form can be any object, but the shape, it can only be an object which we can define by a limitation. But say when we attain the dhyana of limitless space, so the mind has no, so to say, any shape, because in a limitless space there are no shapes, but this limitless space is still form. That's why mind can dwell in it. So whatever is form can give rise to mind. Without a form, we cannot imagine the uh, arising of a mind. But this mind which arises based on the form can have shape, but the principle of mind from which forms arise is shapeless. And this shapeless mind from which the shapes arise is known in this tradition as the jnana kaya, the body of knowledge. Very wonderful word, body of knowledge. We want to attain higher realization, we have to be uh, familiar with the body of knowledge. And the author explains as the nature of knowledge is rupa. We only can know in the sense of perceive what we perceive. We can then experience what we don't perceive. Uh, it is not experience in the true sense, because experience means the experience or reception of some form. So the nature of knowledge is form. Without a without the form, without the sun, we cannot imagine any race. So similarly, without the true mind, we cannot understand any forms, shapes. And thus, the Dharmakaya is what spreads to all places, just like the rays of the sun in our solar system can spread to all places. As the forms which it manifests have no limitations. Hmm? So, in other words, if we know the true principle underlying the mind, then we will also know that the forms which this mind manifests have no limitations, because that which has no shape gives rise to all shapes. It can manifest immeasurable bodhisattvas, sambhogakayas. It can manifest the subtle forms and ornaments in the 10 directions, because everything is in this tradition only um, only true mind, and the true mind uh, is empty. That's why we recite every day the uh, Poje Polomi Sinching, the Pragya Paramita Hridaya Sutra, that the form is emptiness and emptiness is form. How can form be emptiness? Because form and the mind which perceives form, they are not different. Both are empty. So when we understand that the forms are creation of the mind, then we can, so to say, recreate our experience on the base of the Sambhogakaya, on the base of body of enjoyment, on the base of the uh, subtle forms through which we so get access to the principle underlying the forms, which is formless. So, uh, this is precisely the teaching of the Avatamsaka Sutra. The principle, the Li, does not conflict, if it is a true principle, does not conflict with the phenomena. And when the principle does not conflict with phenomena, all the phenomena do not hinder each other. Because in the Dharmakaya, there is not this and that. So, in other words, the forms are inseparable from the mind. They belong to the mind. They are creation of the mind. And when we understand that the forms are creation of the mind, then we know when we grasp for forms, we grasp for mind. When we grasp for mind, we grasp for forms. And when we do that, we did not understand the meaning of the dependent origination. When we don't understand the meaning of the dependent origination, we then grasp for forms, we identify with forms. And why we identify? Because we take the experience of the form as being something uh, which is separated from the true mind. So in this tradition, the dependent origination arises from the true mind, which is suchness. So this true mind from which all forms arises in a form of Sambhogakaya, body of enjoyment, can create ornaments in 10 directions without any uh, hindrances. And it says every form is different, yet they have no limitations. They are all kinds of pure lands. Uh, but they all have this different pure lands. They all have the same underlying principle. Because they have the same underlying principle, so they do not obstruct each other. And this experience of non-obstruction is what we want to realize through the meditation of on the non-thinking mind. Hmm? This is why in the Lotus Sutra, the when the Buddha has explained the that there is only one reality, they are not three different nirvanas explained by three different types of disciples. Hmm? So the those disciples who believed that their differentiating mind is the reality, true reality, they would not believe it. So in Lotus Sutra, that's why Buddha, when Buddha is teaching, in the sky appears what is his name? This Prabhuta Ratna Tathagata appears in the air to manifest that this emptiness creates all the pure lands with Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Hmm? Tuo Pao Fo, I think they translate in Chinese this Prabhuta Ratna. Hmm? This Tuo Pao Fo in the Lotus Sutra manifests the truth that all forms are manifested in suchness, in emptiness. And so there are all kinds of different Sambhogakayas. There are all kinds of different pure lands. Every bodhisattva creates his pure land according to his vows and so on. Yet the underlying principle is the same. The mind gives rise to the form, not form gives rise to the mind. When we understand that clearly, then we also understand this clinging to the form is clinging to the mind, clinging to the mind is clinging to the forms. So our clinging will be reduced and we experience at least some taste, very limited taste of the uh, freedom of mind, which belongs to the Dharma Dhatu, which belongs to the true reality, underlying the same principle. In this true reality, the true mind, there are no obstacles. The obstacles happen because we don't understand the true reality, the true mind. So by practicing the pure land, the bodhisattva is supposed to have some slight understanding in our case that this Sambhogakaya, this body of enjoyment, has no obstacles. In the pure land, the distinctions are not obstacles because we don't recollect, we don't practice a pure land, which is a pure land of the mind. What is a pure land of the mind? The true mind, which is does not identify with differentiations, because the true mind does not identify with differentiations. Therefore, the objects that appear in the uh, pure mind, the sh, they never leave the li, the underlying principle. Hmm? The sh, jusha li jusha sh. The phenomena never leave the underlying principle, and the underlying principle and phenomena, they always appear together. So in this way we can understand the Heart Sutra saying that se chi she kong kong chi she se, the form, just form is emptiness. It is not some emptiness which exists related to form, or in regards to form, that very form which is there now, which was there before, which will be there in future, has always been emptiness, because the underlying principle of forms is the true mind, which is suchness. So we practice Pure Land, which is the most common practice in the Mahayana tradition, because we want to experience that the consciousness is underlying principle, underlying all forms, and therefore all forms that relate to this pure consciousness, to this pure land, they are pure. Pure means not creating obstacles. Well, I thought we would finish. Now it's only uh, one more paragraph, which is very important and which is, in a way, the summary of the philosophy which we have learned from many, many different aspects. And this philosophy, how it is connected to practice, starts to be explained in this very short passage. After that, we come more to the part of the treatise which is more easily understood. What prevents us from experiencing the true nature of dependent origination, which is the emptiness of self and emptiness of all the phenomena. So let us finish here. Otherwise, it is still quite long, this passage, but we will, as it summarizes in a way what was said before, we will pay attention to it next week, and we will go to the next part of the explanatory section of this treatise, which is the longest one. And the following section, which is how to counter evil clingings to self. Hmm? It's quite easy to understand, and we will come to it next week. Okay, so let us transfer merit for the benefit of all sentient beings, and let us try to make it base for our practice we are practicing, in order to realize that which is in this tradition the only true reality. There is no other. Eta vata chame sambhatam punya sampadam sabbe deva anumodantu sabha sampati siddhya. Eta vata chame sambhatam punya sampadam sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabha sampati siddhya. Eta vata chame sambhatam punya sampadam sabbe satta anumodantu sabha sampati siddhya. 愿你自功德普济一切，我等一众生皆空成佛道。May the merits of this practice of Dharma spread to all beings, so that we attain the state of perfect realization. Om Mitra. Okay, so we will finish here and continue next week.